instead of brought to you by.
Where?
The first page of the slideshow.
All right. We're going to have to change that. Welcome to the Dynasty Force Podcast. A little bit of a weird intro because, Bill's the host today. So we're switching it up a little bit. You can click into the presentation. No.
I believe, yeah. There you
go. Where you can find me and Rob.
All right, so you can find me on Twitter at FantasyForceFB. On my Twitter, I retweet a lot of content. I'm gonna say this multiple times throughout the season, but it's all about bringing you content that is, great for your eyes, whether I agree with it or not. So I just try and be a hub with that. So I try to present that on my page, and I'm gonna start pumping out more content as the season progresses. Where next week's really gonna be start of week 1, so it's a fun time to be here. Bill, how's your Twitter looking?
My Twitter's looking pretty good. You can follow me over at Getting Bills. You already know Parlay Bill over there. We got picks and plays for all different types of sports. And then we have an announcement too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Here we are. Subscribe over to YouTube and check out Pub Sports Radio. You want to go a little deeper into that, Bill?
Yes, I will. I just got signed over to Pub Sports Radio to do some content for them for MMA and some different other sports. So I definitely want to get everybody on there over at Pub Sports Radio, because once we build up this pod will be over there too. So hopefully we can get that done, Robbie, and get this pod big enough so we can get signed over to Pub for fantasy sports.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. Congratulations. I know, the work that you've put in on MMA recently, as far as not just DFS, but all the, the tape and the grinding and actually knowing your shit and knowing who's going to do well and who isn't. So it takes a lot of effort. And like I said, it's a serious grind. So along with all of this news, and this being an important episode, we want to welcome in our guest. He's a great follow on Twitter at DeepDiveFF. I see his website here as well, deepdivefantasyfootball.com, where you can find his podcasts, his articles, free draft sheets, and hot takes. And most importantly, his name is Brandon. Brandon, how are you doing today?
Good, man. How are you?
Oh, we're doing great. We are so excited to have you on this episode on the Dynasty Force Podcast today, because this is going to be one of the best episodes that we put out this year, because we are talking up our favorite players for the 2020 season. And I was looking around on Twitter like, okay, whose opinion do I really respect? Who do I want to hear more from about why they love specific players? And we're in a few support groups together, so that's how I've kind of gotten to know you so far. But I obviously retweet a lot of your content, and I've really enjoyed doing so and seeing all the content up to that point. So I was very happy to bring you on. Very happy you could join us.
Happy to be on, man. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. All right. Quick question for this episode. Who's your biggest bust heading into this year for 2020 redraft leagues? Brandon, as our guest, I will allow you to go first here.
All right, so if I have to pick one, it's going to be pretty tough. There's like 3 guys that stick out to me the most, and that's Nick Chubb, Cortland Sutton, and Aaron Rodgers. But if I have to pick one of them to be the biggest bust this year, Specifically in redraft, I would have to go with Nick Chubb, because the thing for me with Nick Chubb is if you look at his splits with and without Kareem Hunt, he dropped from 18.5, I believe, in PPR points per game to about 12.5 once Hunt came back. That's like a 40% cut. And then he also only was receiving 27% of the receiving work between him and Hunt also outdid him in touchdowns. And I know that Chubb got like a whole bunch of, red zone carries. He got a lot more than Hunt did, but Hunt was more efficient. And Stefanski coming in, we don't know what he's going to do. We don't know who he's going to prefer in the red zone. We don't know how he's going to utilize them. But one thing I do know is that Kareem Hunt is the better receiver. And when you have two great running backs that can both run the ball, but one is significantly better in the receiving game, I feel like he's the better red zone threat. So Chubb just scares me because although I have him as like second in the league for rushing yards right behind Derrick Henry, I don't think he's going to get the receptions, and he doesn't have the touchdown like ceiling that other guys have, in my opinion. So that's why I think Chubb, like at that turn, that's like 12, 13 turn, is too high for me.
Yeah, I was in a few drafts over this weekend, and I was seeing Chubb basically a mainstay in that 12, 13, 14 area. And I mean, it's fine in my opinion if you have a guy like Miles Sanders or Joe Mixon, where like they're going to almost certainly be a running back 1, and then you can have Chubb in there as a running back 2. But I just feel like at that area, there's so many other guys that you could shoot for higher upside, like, and
Sure.
I'm sure that's another point of what you're trying to say here is that it's nothing against the talent of Nick Chubb. It's more
Definitely
so,
not.
yeah, it's more so like guys are in better situation for this season. Bill,
Sure.
you want to head in your biggest bust for this 2020 year?
My biggest bust for this upcoming year, a lot of people aren't going to like it, but it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins.
I had a feeling this one was coming.
Yeah, over in Arizona, man. I feel like he's just being drafted too high. We have a found memory of DeAndre Hopkins being one of the top tier wide receivers in the league, but the only problem with that is that Arizona runs a air raid offense, and Kyler Murray doesn't like to lock down on the one target. He kind of likes to spread the ball out, throw it to the open space, and I just feel like DeAndre Hopkins' actual targets are going to come down, and that's going to affect his numbers for the upcoming season because fantasy owners that drafted DeAndre Hopkins last year were not happy with the beginning start of the year. And honestly, fantasy football, especially this year, I'm trying to start off 4-0, man. That's the only way you can really make the playoffs, or I should say that's the quickest way to make the playoffs, starting off 4-0.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how I feel about Hopkins. Like I like him, but I don't like the spot where he's going. And maybe Brandon can agree with that.
Yeah. So Hopkins is actually, it's funny because I do my projections. I like project every stat for like 200 something players on the season. And Hopkins came out and graded out as my wide receiver 4. And I'm not as worried with the target count. But the one thing that does give me hesitation is sometimes I deviate from my projections when I'm actually drafting based off like risk, potential, stuff like that, And I do think Hopkins does definitely hold more risk because of the already harder offseason with COVID. He hasn't had as much time to get acclimated to the offense, the system, get chemistry with Kyler Murray and whatnot. So I'm a little bit worried about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's still a top 5 receiver because Christian Kirk did get a 25% target share, and that was with Larry Fitzgerald on the field last year. I don't think it's crazy to think that DeAndre Hopkins could get around 27, 28%. And if he does, I mean, we know he's one of the most elite receivers in the league. He'll be able to do a lot with it. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's top 5, but I don't feel comfortable drafting him there, especially because all the running backs around him. So I don't really have a problem with, you slighting Hopkins.
Right. So for Hopkins, I more so have him around the 8 to 9 range because of the risk of changing teams. The air raid offense, the Arizona Cardinals, I believe, were around 52% in four wide receiver sets last year. And Kyler Murray is a good quarterback. And the thing about good quarterbacks, I mean, in most cases, because Deshaun Watson was kind of an exception here, but they're going to throw to the open guy. And I think Deshaun Watson was more along the lines of when he got in trouble, he would find DeAndre Hopkins and kind of, go straight to him. But I don't think Kyler Murray is going to have that much of a worry because having 4 wide receivers on the field, it's hard to guard DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, and Christian Kirk. And then also, like, even if Andy Isabella or Hakeem Butler are switching in at wide receiver 4, and then you have Kenyon Drake out of the backfield, there's too many to really hone in on a guy. So like I said, I think Kyler's just going to throw to the guy who's open this year, and that could be Hopkins. It could lead to better efficiency, but it could also lead to a shorter or a smaller target share. Billy, if you could bring it up, ClapGod253 said Emmanuel Sanders, and I know
Shane, man.
No, here's the thing. He is only saying this to bother me because he believes in Emmanuel Sanders. We've had this conversation before.
He sent the smiley face, man. He doesn't mean it.
So, Brandon and all the listeners, to give some context, I bought Emmanuel Sanders in a Dynasty League, and I may have overpaid a bit.
Just a bit.
D.D. Westbrook in a first-round pick. Now,
What?
hold on.
God.
First of all, I believe in Emmanuel Sanders. I believe he'll be a very strong contributor this season. So I believe the first round pick is worth it. And I think he could even be beyond that if, potentially Jameis Winston re-signs with New Orleans. But as a contending team, I'm not too worried about my first round pick. Yes, it is a bit much, but I wanted to go out and get my guy. Also, D.D. Westbrook was just kind of a throw-in to me. And now there's also rumors that he might be cut by Jacksonville this year. So,
yeah, man, I told Rob, man, you better win that fantasy league making that pick.
And now Shane is commenting again. I took Sanders in Rob's home league just to get a fat package from him. By the way, you will never, ever receive a fat package from anyone because you're just an unlucky man, a bad fantasy player, Shane. Moving on here. Moving on to my biggest bust for this upcoming year. I had it in mind and then I kind of forgot it, honestly, as we were talking.
Dude,
I know. Shane really threw me off with his Emmanuel Sanders comment. I was not expecting that at all. I agree with the DeAndre Hopkins take a lot. I've found myself avoiding all 3 of the guys that you've mentioned over there, Brandon, with Aaron Rodgers, Nick Chubb, and Courtland Sutton. If I had to throw another guy out there, I think it's a little tougher, but I think just where he's being drafted, DK Metcalf could be a bust. I mean, he's being drafted in the sense of he's going to be Seattle's number 1. Like, he's getting drafted over Tyler Lockett in a lot of leagues. He is on an offense where, like, the whole argument this offseason has been let Russ cook, right? But the problem with that is that it's just not going to happen. Like, Seattle has won up to this point. They've won playoff games. They've gotten to the playoffs almost, I believe, every single year for the past, 6-7 years now, in doing their offense the same way. And their offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer, who's not only very uncreative in how he runs an offense, he has also come out and said that, it's dependent on how the games go. So while DK was great last season, especially towards the end of the season, Tyler Lockett was also kind of falling off because of an injury. So I think the expectations are just a bit high for DK. I'm not saying he's not going to be valuable in fantasy, but I do believe that he just won't necessarily return on the value he's being drafted at.
Yeah, Rob, I definitely do agree with you. I have Tyler Lockett significantly ranked higher than DK Metcalf for my rankings this upcoming season.
Yeah, if we're talking about Dynasty, I completely understand them being in the same conversation. But yeah, for 2020, I think it's a pretty, decent gap between Lockett and Metcalf. Brandon, do you agree with that?
So I understand. Like, I agree with the part that DK is being drafted higher than Lockett, and that shouldn't necessarily be the case because I actually have Lockett, and I did not do this on purpose. But I have Lockett and DK statted right next to each other. Their projections are different, but their total fantasy points are almost neck to neck. And I mean, I understand why people are taking DK because he has that potential to make that huge jump as a red zone threat. And they've also said that they're planning on giving him a bigger route tree, so that could lead to more targets. But I do think Lockett he's definitely the safer guy, and he has just as high of a ceiling. So I love getting Lockett because he's like a round later for sure. But I don't think necessarily that DK would be a bust because he was still pretty good when, like in the first 8 games of the season, he was almost just as good as the back half. So I still think he'll be pretty good.
Yeah, definitely understand both sides of that. All right, excuse me. Moving on here, we're gonna head into some news and notes. All right, so Alvin Kamara, we'll start with that.
That one's debunked. I made this morning.
Yeah. So it's just an interesting situation though because I mean it's kind of debunked. All right, so Alvin Kamara did miss 3 straight practices over contract negotiation. Then late last night, I believe, it came out that the Saints were willing to trade Alvin Kamara, but then it also came out that they prefer not to trade Alvin Kamara, but that they would trade him for the right price and that they were seeking a first-round pick. Now, to me, that says they're not trading Alvin Kamara because they're not getting a first-round pick for him. So as far as contract negotiations go, Alvin Kamara came back to practice today, and he and the Saints are going to apparently sit down and come closer on a contract. I guess in that sense you should not be as worried about Alvin Kamara, but if you follow Ian Rappaport at Ian Rappaport on Twitter, he also mentioned that Alvin Kamara got an epidural shot when he started to miss practice over the first, I believe it was, the day of the first missed practice. And that was, him kind of taking a break. So for me, that actually gives me a little bit of worry about Alvin Kamara and whether he can actually sustain health throughout this season. Because, epidurals are, there's painkillers or shots where they're just given to kind of help you manage some pain, and that's the NFL, but we don't know how severe an injury this could be. There's, I'm not going to say small epidurals, but it's just never something you want to see out of a top 5 pick in fantasy drafts before the season even starts. You know what I'm saying? Brandon, had you heard about this news and did it impact your thoughts on Kamara? And if you didn't hear about the news, I'm happy to bring the news to you. And does it change your thoughts on Kamara?
So no, I didn't hear the news about the epidural. I mean, it might make it difficult, more difficult of a decision for me to choose between him and Clyde. But I mean, until I hear something substantial, Kamara might be out for a certain amount of weeks or something, I'll probably still take the chance on him. But I could definitely see myself on the clock pulling the trigger on Clyde over Kamara if we don't hear anything from that and I'm still worried about it.
Billy, what about you? I know you're already taking Clyde over Kamara because you have Clyde absurdly high.
It's not absurdly high, man. The rookie's the safest option early on in drafts. I have him ranked
it's pretty crazy.
Number 3 for the upcoming season RB wise, and he is number 3 on my board for redraft leagues. I'm getting all the Clyde.
It's pretty crazy how a rookie who has never touched the field before is the safest option between guys like Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook. What a world that we're living in. You have in this slide Latavius Murray and Ty Montgomery. I still would like to talk about that because, if it kind of comes out that the epidural may have been something to hold him off a little more seriously. And by the way, the Twitter account that really pointed this out to me that it was a serious thing, not necessarily serious, but something to keep an eye on. At FB Injury Doc, Edwin Porras on Twitter. He's a great follow. Go follow him if you don't already. But Latavius Murray, I actually was in a 10-man league draft last night. And in the late 8th round, I pulled the trigger on Latavius Murray because, it's a shot, right? Like, Latavius, to me, has the upside of Alvin Kamara. Like, he showed that last season when he played 2 games where Alvin Kamara didn't. Billy, would that kind of be too high for you? 8th round in a 10-man league. I know the mindset in a 10-man league is kind of different. Like, it's all about that upside.
For me, man, I can understand because we have seen time and time again when Kamara's out, Latavius Murray is basically a top 10 running back. My only fear is the reason why I put versus Ty Montgomery is because this is the first time that we're seeing a natural pass catcher in that backfield. Let's say if Kamara went out, who's to say that Montgomery doesn't get on the field for some pass catching work because he's already working with the wide receivers over there in training camp from the beat reporters that I've been following over on Twitter.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Ty Montgomery's camp as well. Brandon, how do you feel about the backfield situation? Say Alvin Kamara, tomorrow, I don't know, gets traded or something.
So I would definitely like Latavius more than Ty Montgomery, of course. But I do think Montgomery can kind of lower Latavius' ceiling. He was actually, I think, the RB2 or RB1 when Kamara was down, when he was, the main guy last year. But it's also
the 2 weeks combined.
receptions.
The 2 weeks combined, I believe he was RB1, and I believe he was RB2 the first week and RB3 the second.
Yeah. So he's proven to be really good. And obviously, if they traded away Kamara, that would already tell you that they're very high on the duo of Murray and Montgomery, because you don't trade Kamara when this is Breeze's last year and he's trying to get to the Super Bowl if you don't think you can get there without him. So I would still like Latavius a lot, but I'm curious, did you have a big bench on a deep bench on that 10-team league?
No,
it's a good question.
I had a really good starting lineup, so I felt like
shoot for
I ended up with Saquon Barkley and Aaron Jones in the first 2 rounds. And then I ended up with 3 wide receivers starting of Odell Beckham, Calvin Ridley, and Tyler Lockett. And so I also took Cam Akers and Brandon Cooks after that. And I'm pretty, hint, hint, I'm pretty confident in them. So, I felt like I was in a great position to kind of take a shot there. So, like I said, 10-man league, he either hits a home run or he's not even in my starting lineup at that point,
Yeah.
All right, moving on here. Leonard Fournette cut by the Jaguars over the weekend. There's just a lot to digest about it. First things first, I think Leonard Fournette obviously... All right, before anything, Billy.
Yes.
Eat shit, my friend, because I was completely off on Leonard Fournette all offseason. You were trying to argue against me. I just wanted to tell you in person that you are an asshole and I won this bet.
Hey, all I got to say is I just put my bet on the person that had the second most market share for running backs. How about you, Brandon? How'd you feel about the whole entire situation? Were you on Leonard Fournette, or this confirmed the suckiness of Leonard Fournette for you?
So no, I wasn't on Leonard Fournette at all, but it's pretty messed up to take a victory lap that he was cut.
Oh, no. I'm going to take this victory lap all around the world because Bill, like I said, when this was an all off-season thing, we got the pod started, I'm going to say 3 or 4 months ago, and it has been, I want to say since the very first episode that Billy and I have been arguing about Leonard Fournette, since even before that. And yes, I'm sorry. I know it's a shitty situation to take a victory lap on, but I am damn glad to do it. honestly.
And
I'm very happy.
I'm glad that the viewers can get different viewpoints about players and stuff like that, because Rob told people to buy Chris Thompson. If you bought Chris Thompson, man, your shares are paying off right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Just jumped up.
I believe before this news, I had 4 shares of Chris Thompson, and across 8 leagues, I want to say. So, yeah, for me personally, this was, I mean, great news for my fantasy teams because I had no shares of Leonard Fournette as well. So, let's start with really quick where you think Leonard Fournette might go. From what I saw, the top 2 teams in odds were the Chicago Bears at number 1 and then the New England Patriots at number 2. Matt Nagy apparently kind of shrugged off the idea of getting Fournette today, and Bill Belichick said he's doing his due diligence, but he's not necessarily interested. All right, let's start with Brandon. Where might Leonard Fournette end up?
It better not be the Bucs. That's all I got to say.
I agree with that.
I got 2 sides from that because, one, I'm a huge Rojo guy. As long as we don't sign Leonard Fournette, Rojo was going to be one of my guys. But just the fact that, there's a lot of news right now connecting the Bucs and Arians to Fournette. Yeah, I'm not going to go that direction with Rojo. But Rojo's going to be a solid RB2 if it's just him and Vaughn and McCoy. And so hopefully that's, he doesn't come for that reason because I have Rojo everywhere. Plus, I'm also a Bucs fan, and I don't think Leonard Fournette's as good as everyone thinks he is. He's not bad, but, I don't really think he's going to help us that much. So, as long as it's not to us.
Man, Dare Ungunlewale as the third down back. You forgot about him. He's going to be on the field more than McCoy. Sleep on it.
That's fine as long as he's not replacing Rojo.
And he won't on first and second down work. I can guarantee you that. I know there's a lot of smoke with him.
I think this is the perfect time to hop into our first My Guy, and the first My Guy that we're going to talk about. We're shooting this to Brandon. Brandon.
All right. I'll go with Antonio Gibson. I love the guy. I think he is going to be replacing or basically taking over the Chris Thompson role in Washington. And if you look at that role, just last year from an 11-game sample, Thompson was on pace for 84 targets. And that's despite the fact that Washington only threw the ball 479 times. Now they have the Carolina staff basically taking over, and we saw the Panthers throw more than 600 times last year. So if the Redskins are anywhere near 580, and you have that same target share going to the running back position, which I think is minimum going to happen, then you could see Antonio Gibson getting 90 targets. Thompson got 84 last year. Gibson's taking the spot, and if they throw more, boom, there you go. Plus, the fact that Kelvin Harmon tore his ACL, and it was basically him and McLaurin and Steven Sims are the mainstays from last year. And so now with, more targets on the table since Harmon got hurt, a lot of times the targets go to the running back position. So I think that between Gibson and McKissick and Love, I think they're going to use them, but I think Gibson is by far going to have the biggest hold on that position. Plus with Geis gone, he might get some carries too. So I love Gibson a lot. This is super hot. I know it is, but Antonio Gibson's actually my running back 24. I have him just because people are going to lose their mind when they hear that. I have to tell you what my stat projection is. So I have him for 94 attempts. Okay, that's what is that? That's six a game. Six a game would be 96. So I have him about 6 attempts a game, and then 422 yards. Pretty decent. There's nothing crazy there. Then I have him at 70 receptions because he's efficient, and I have him around 90 targets, 581 yards, and only 6 touchdowns. I'm pretty fearless with my touchdowns. So all my guys at the top, I have double-digit touchdowns projected for. So Gibson with 6 touchdowns compared to relative to all my projections is pretty safe, and it puts him at 24. So I think he's going to be a huge value because he's not being drafted inside the top 30, 35 right now.
I definitely do see your point. The only thing that concerns me about Antonio Gibson, I just have a weird feeling because I'm an Eagle fan. So the Redskins coaching system, man, I just feel like they're going to just play old man Adrian Peterson out there for some odd reason. But honestly, man, I feel like they talk about Antonio Gibson like he's the next Christian McCaffrey. So I definitely can see your number 24 projection for him for this upcoming season. I'm glad that you're on here for those type of hot takes for tonight, man.
Yeah, for sure, man.
The second player that we're going to talk about, this is one of my guys, actually, Kenyon Drake of the Arizona Cardinals. The reason why I picked him is because he's getting a negative vibe around the industry right now with the walking boot situation, but he's out the walking boot now. But the public perception about Kenyon Drake is that he overachieved in a small sample size last season. In fantasy, sometimes I feel like you could twist around numbers in order to make a player sound better than what they really are. But Kenyon Drake having a clear path to being a top 5 back this season, I feel like is a fact, not an opinion, even though I worded that as an opinion. He ran for 3.7 yards per carry with the Dolphins. And then last year for the Cardinals, he averaged 5 yards per carry. 80% of those Dolphins run formations when he played over there were to the strong side. And as a defender, you can just go to the side of the tight end and what side they're on, which is the strong side, and just blitz that side if you have a good middle linebacker. Simply not having the backfield penetration every snap and being in a good scheme with a mobile quarterback. I love Kenyon Drake. He's one of the strongest RB buys for me this upcoming season. To be honest with you, I feel like he can get slippery in space. He's very fast. And those are the traits that you're looking for with a dual threat quarterback. RBs are more dependent on their situation itself. I really like the play calling over there. 20% of Kenyon Drake's runs were in the RPO, which allowed him to gain extra yards. He averaged 6.6 yards per carry in those RPO sets. In addition, another 29% of Kenyon Drake's carries, they use a pre-snap motion to the strong side, which ran 59% of his runs. So I just feel like the upside is there for Kenyon Drake, not because he overproduced. It's more because I feel like people are underestimating the situation itself and the play calling, because the play calling is going to put him in good situations. You want to attack running backs that are with a dual threat quarterback. How do you feel about Kenyon Drake for the upcoming season? I literally own him on every one of my teams for this upcoming season.
I love him. I think he's going to be great. I actually was buying him right after the trade to Arizona last year, and obviously that worked out. He's not only in a great situation with a mobile quarterback, which we know always helps running backs be more efficient, but some people are worried about maybe his receptions because, they go 4 wide sometimes, like a lot of the time, and they just added DeAndre Hopkins. Honestly, usually the running back position is not too much impacted by additions on the other position, like the other positions in the offense. So I think he's still going to get a lot of receiving work, which is going to be great. Plus, Arizona was not efficient at all last year in the red zone. They were one of the worst teams at converting to touchdowns. And Kenyon Drake was still good, and he still had a really high touchdown count for them in the limited time that he was there. So even if you see some regression just because of how good he was, he's going to get the usage. He's going to get the receiving work, and he's going to be in a much better offense. And you can't stack the box versus the Cardinals. There's no way you can do that with the receivers that they have and the fact that Kyler can go anywhere he wants on the field. So I love Drake a lot. And I actually think people that are worried about him because he hasn't signed a contract yet, we just saw Mixon sign a contract. I think Kamara's probably going to sign a contract within the next few days. And so, everyone's signing contracts. I wouldn't be surprised if Drake gets one pretty soon here. And his is probably going to be pretty reasonable for the Cardinals too. And once he signs a contract, his dynasty value is going to go up. So I don't mind getting him at all right now in dynasty leagues, because I definitely think he's like a locked-in top 10 running back if he stays in Arizona.
Welcome back, Rob. Do you have any negative sentiments against Kenyon Drake for the upcoming season?
Thank you for welcoming me back. This, by the way, I want to say, I know it's very unprofessional for me and how often I cut out, and it's very bad. However, I am working on that. I have a new laptop. Of course, they didn't send me the charger, so now I have to wait for the charger. But hopefully next week, fingers crossed, the charger will be here and I will be back in action at 100%. So here's to hoping that I don't cut out again this episode, because that would be unfortunate. As far as Kenyon Drake, I don't really have anything against. I mean, I would love to really have a point against him. Maybe he doesn't get, north of 40 receptions, but I really don't even necessarily think he needs north of 40 receptions because he's a great pass catcher, so he'll be efficient on his receptions, and he's going to be efficient on the ground because the Cardinals are going to be a great running team because of Kyler and the fact that opposing defenses are not going to be able to stack the box against Arizona because they're always going to have four, well, not always, but over half the time they have 4 wide receivers on the field. And you just can't stack the box against an offense when they have 4 wide receivers on the field. And, one of them is Christian Kirk, who's a burner. One of them is probably Andy Isabella, who's a burner. One of them's DeAndre Hopkins, So it just doesn't make sense for me as far as defenses trying to hone in and stop Kenyon Drake. So I Kenyon Drake is a guy that I was always hoping would get an opportunity, and now, here he is. He's getting the opportunity, so I'm happy to buy in. So I guess it's my turn now, right?
Yes, your guy.
Tell me who my guy is. Tell me, because I don't know.
Your guy is Mr. Derrick Henry, the Tennessee Titan. Oh, man. Remember the negative sentiments that used to be about Derrick Henry back in fantasy football in the old days, and then he had the season like he had last year? Rob, get into why you love Derrick Henry for this upcoming season.
Dude, if you had told me just 1 year ago, even after, the end of 2018 when he was tearing it up against those bad teams, even if you had told me then, like, he and tried to point out the upsides heading into last season, I still would have been off on Derrick Henry. And if you told me that he would be my guy heading into the 2020 season, I would have called you insane and said you had no idea what you were talking about. But the fact is, I think Derrick Henry is an immense value for where he's going because I just think that people are so worried about receptions for Derrick Henry. And I think he's the rare case like Marshawn Lynch where he doesn't need a ton of volume in the receiving game in order to be great for fantasy. The entire offense in Tennessee revolves around Derrick Henry. I was looking at stat projections for ESPN the other day. I don't know what you have statted out for Derrick Henry, Brandon, but personally, I have him statted out for 336 carries. And that might even be a little low, honestly, because I just think everyone knows the plan for Tennessee is to hand the ball off to Derrick Henry 30 times a game and win because he's that good and their defense is good. Do you have your carry count up?
Yeah, I just pulled it up while you said that. I have Derrick Henry at 317, so a little bit lower than you, but I have him leading the league in attempts. He, like you said, is the entire offense there. I know they have A.J. Brown, but A.J. Brown didn't even get a lot of targets last year. And as long as they can stay good, that's honestly the only worry for me, is because somehow like Tennessee always outperforms the talent on their roster, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I think it's just great coaching. But Derrick Henry is kind of relying on touchdowns almost. But like we said, he's the offense, so I think he's one of the safer guys to project a lot of touchdowns for. The only thing that worries me is if their offense ends up taking a huge step back because every single position was insanely efficient last year. Like Tannehill was the leader in the NFL in like half of the quarterback categories, which obviously we know he's not that guy, so that's going to come down. A.J. Brown's efficiency from 20 yards per reception, he's more of a 15, 16 guy, that's going to come down. So if that stuff comes down and they actually take like a big hit, also losing, it was Jack Conklin, right, that they lost to Cleveland? Yeah. So, if their offense ends up not being as good, I think Henry will be, a little bit worse because he won't get as much touchdowns. And, we know he's not the receiving guy. So if they're losing a lot of games, they won't put him in. But with all that said, I do have him as my running back 6. And Cook is somebody I have in front of him, but I'm not drafting Dalvin Cook because of his injury risk. It's way too much, way too high for me. And also the whole contract situation right now. So Derrick Henry is, basically my RB5. I was curious. I wanted to ask you, what running backs are you taking over him? Is there any after the big 4?
So Kamara, I would probably move down a little bit right now. And I think in regular drafts, I would take Clyde Edwards-Helaire over him. So at this moment, I'd probably take him 5th, which, I mean, isn't overly high, but the fact is that Derrick Henry falls to the late first round in a lot of drafts, in a lot
I
of
was
home
going to say
leagues,
that
because
because I have him ranked a little bit lower. My fault for cutting you off.
no, you're good. My point is that this team has committed so much to Derrick Henry, as I mean, 4 years, $50 million. He got paid this offseason. But also their first round pick, they did lose Jack Conklin, but they saw the need to immediately replace that right tackle, and so they reached up a little bit on a guy. And honestly, sometimes I'm worried about reaching on a guy, but sometimes I feel like it's a team looking for the right fit and having a good mindset about a player. And that's the kind of, area that I feel like Isaiah Wilson, who I believe was the first round pick of the Titans, I just feel like they believe he's the right fit for the team and what they're trying to do.
Can I quickly say this is Braden Sheet. We were talking about his website earlier, Deep Dive Fantasy Football. I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
DeepDiveFantasyFootball.com. I'll definitely retweet it and show you guys. Man, I'm telling you, this website is really nice. This is what I have highlighted right now. Since we're talking about Derrick Henry, I have his stat projection projected by Brandon himself. It is very detailed. My fault for cutting you off, Rob. I just want
you're good.
To show you how detailed this really is. He has the special notes. He has the snap count. He has the consistency. He has the ranking if they finish at RB 1, 2, or 3, and he also has risk potential and their scoring potential for the different type of leagues. Brandon, I'm telling you, man, without even talking to you about it, I want the people to know what you have detailed in here that I didn't even talk about already.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And just curious, that VORP thing, the VORP, that's a value over replacement. Have you ever happened to look at that before?
Yes.
Yeah. So value over replacement.
I've looked at it in baseball.
Yes.
Baseball, okay. For those that don't know what that is, it's basically it helps you make cross positional decisions. So a lot of times, like if you're on the board and you're like, hey man, should I take Miles Sanders or Clyde Edwards-Helaire? You just look at the rankings, the projections. It's an easy decision to make based off that because they're at the same position. But if you're deciding between Miles Sanders and Devontae Adams, you want to look at the VORP because basically my VORP would tell you how much points per game per week taking Miles Sanders as your RB1 or 2, depending on where you're drafting him, would help you and give you an advantage compared to taking Devontae Adams as your wide receiver 1. So you can compare stuff like that. It's pretty dope. I use it to help me make cross-positional decisions. So that's basically what that is. I know most people don't know what it is, so I figured I'd explain it real quick.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that to the people that are listening to the audio version of this podcast, because that will definitely help them out.
Yeah, definitely.
Our next My Guy, we're going right back down the well with Rob, with Cam Akers, the rookie, man. I love this one.
So I'm surprised that you did not make a My Guy, Billy, because unless I did it first, because you have been kind of taking him ahead of me too many times in too many leagues so far, and it's kind of pissing me off at this point, honestly. But Cam Akers, man, where do I start? But I don't know where he got this information originally, but a man who commented already on the episode at Detroit Beastie, Chris Robin on Twitter. I screenshotted the picture. Here it is. Vacated carries by teams and the rookie running backs that will help fill them. The most vacated carries by a team that drafted a rookie running back. Obviously, the Los Angeles Rams are number 1 because, Todd Gurley was the workhorse and Todd Gurley's gone. After that, it's the Chargers, it's the Bills. They're both under the 200 range. But the Los Angeles Rams lost 234 carries with Todd Gurley. That is a workhorse role that has vacated. You look at the competition that Cam Akers has in-house, it's going to be Malcolm Brown. Okay, old reliable, but where's the upside? Darrell Henderson and John Kelly. Now, John Kelly is a former 7th-round pick. I'm not worried about him. But Darrell Henderson would probably be the biggest competition, who's a guy who barely saw the field last year. But if you were to tell me that the Rams have a ton of confidence in Darrell Henderson after they spent a 2nd-round pick on Cam Akers, when their team this year was, I mean, it wasn't in shambles, but it kind of felt like they were, because coming off of the Super Bowl, they went 8-8, and they had so many offensive line problems. They didn't have a 1st-round pick because they don't have, or I'm sorry, because they traded it for Jalen Ramsey, and here they are spending their 1st pick on Cam Akers in the draft. It doesn't spell confidence for me in Darrell Henderson. So I think Cam Akers, among all of the rookies, I mean, obviously not Clyde Edwards-Helaire now because of Damian Williams opting out, but among all of the rookies, Cam Akers has the clearest path to actually getting a role in the offense. And, Sean McVay has talked about already, being jealous of the 4 running back system that San Francisco uses, but I kind of think that's more by necessity. You have Raheem Mostert, who's good at some things and not great at others. Tevin Coleman, same thing. Last year it was Jeff Wilson and Matt Breida, and you could make they're good at some things. Matt Breida is a good receiver, not so great inside, in between the tackles. You could go in depth on each one, but they all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses. But when you compare Cam Akers to guys like Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson, he is clearly better. And I just don't think it's going to take long for Sean McVay to see that. And Sean McVay is not a dumb coach. There's the argument of irrational coaching where a coach will continue to play a bad player over a good player.
Argument.
The Adam Gase argument, Matt Patricia, when who was it? LeGarrette Blount kept getting carries over Kerryon Johnson, things like that. But Sean McVay is not like that. Sean McVay would be glad to play Cam Akers in that role if he's the best player, and I just don't think it's going to take long for him to separate himself from the other running backs in that backfield.
I definitely do agree with you with that, Rob. Cam Akers, I didn't want to make him a my guy because I knew you were already going to talk about him, but that's another one of the players that, oddly enough, is on a lot of my fantasy teams for the upcoming season.
Like I said, you're stealing him from me.
Yeah,
Brandon.
Brandon, what are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. I had one of the boys that write for me on the website. He did a whole article on Cam Akers, and obviously, the articles that are on my website are aligned with me and my reputation. So he asked me, he was like, "Yo, can I do an article on Cam Akers, or do you not like him?" And I was like, "Bro, are you kidding me? Cam Akers?" He was
people.
So good behind such a shitty O-line at FSU. So I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, people are so quick to forget how great Cam Akers was in college, because I had him as my RB3 before pre-draft behind Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins. I don't know if you did pre-draft scouting. Where did you have him then? Do you know?
So yeah, I had him. I believe it was 4. I had him. My number 1 was Swift, then Taylor, and then Clyde. I had him 5, then Clyde and Dobbins, and then Akers. But honestly, it's a great RB class. It's nothing against Akers at all.
Right. Yeah, and like you said, he was running behind a terrible offensive line in Florida State. He's going to be running behind a terrible offensive line in Los Angeles. It's the difference maker to me in the NFL system is Sean McVay, because Todd Gurley wasn't the best running back last season. He still found a way to have 12 touchdowns and finishes the RB14 without the receptions. So, to me, Cam Akers has immense upside, and you're getting him, much later than you're getting Jonathan Taylor, much later than DeAndre Swift I've even seen go ahead of Cam Akers in drafts. And to me, that doesn't make any sense at all. Billy.
Yeah, I definitely do agree with that, but I think we should get into the 2 quarterbacks that we have for my guys. First one is another rookie on the list. Brandon's my guy, Joe Burrow, the number 1 overall draft pick of the last season.
Yes, sir. So here's my argument for Joe Burrow. But before I start, I want to lay out what I consider the perfect storm, or the fantasy football equation for a very good breakout quarterback. And one of them is volume. He needs the volume, whether it's a lot of rushing or a lot of pass attempts. You need the volume, obviously. Burrow's going to get that because the Bengals were top 5 in total pass attempts last year, above 600. They're going to be near that this year. Their defense did not get any better, and they are in a tough division. So Burrow's going to have the pass attempts. 2, you need a good receiving core. He's definitely got that. He's got that in spades, and I would not be surprised if this time next year with T. Higgins, even if A.J. Green leaves, T. Higgins on the outside, Auden Tate on the outside, Tyler Boyd on the inside, and Mixon coming out the backfield, if he has one of the top 8 receiving cores in the league. So he's got the good receivers. He's got the volume. And then what else does he have? He has the rushing upside. That's something that you always need in today's game. Because, back in the day, we used to have those Drew Breeses, those Tom Brady's finish as like QB1, QB2. But now with how many people run the ball, even Mahomes, like we compare him to Lamar as the 1 and 2. Mahomes doesn't run the ball nearly as much as Lamar, but he runs the ball. He's in the 200s. So you have to be able to run the ball to have a chance to be really good in fantasy. And Joe Burrow was on pace. If you took his like game per game pace and just applied it straight to the NFL, he would be in the upper 300s, low 400s rushing yards. I only have him projected for 280. And then he would also be on pace for about 7 rushing touchdowns. I have him projected for 4. And with all that said, he's my quarterback 8. It's because I have him throwing so much to a amazing group of receivers. And he has the rushing upside. So all of those things, I think, make the perfect storm for Joe Burrow. And also, I have a hot take on the side with Burrow, and that is that he will be the new record holder for the rookie quarterback passing touchdowns and passing yardage. If you look at the record holder right now, it's Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield did it in only 13 games off less than 500 pass attempts. Burrow has better weapons to do it with. Will pass the ball at least 100 times more or very close to it. And so he's going to be playing 16 games. So it's super easy for me to see him taking the yardage and the touchdown records. And so that's it's kind of like a duo. And when you guys see my next My Guy, it'll make sense why Joe Burrow is one of my guys. But yeah, I love Burrow. I don't see any way that he's not going to be good for fantasy.
Brandon, I'm very, very sorry to cut you off, but I have some big time news to announce. And you're not going to like it.
No,
Leonard Fournette
I
is
just
planning
saw
to sign with the Bucs.
You've got to be kidding me.
Oh, my goodness.
Breaking news on the pod for the people that are listening audio version-wise, man. This is breaking news, so we can get everybody's ideas on the spot. Are you buying Leonard Fournette as a Tampa Bay
I will buy him as a Buck.
Sell.
Seems like a bell cow at that point.
No way. Hard sell.
Because
this is why we're on the pod, baby.
If you have somebody that's going to give you RB1 price or even high-end RB2 price for Fournette with the Bucs, you got to take that because I'm telling you, there's no way he's getting workhorse carries on the Buccaneers. There's no way. They've touted Rojo way too much to this point. And honestly, like I said, I don't think Leonard Fournette's as good as everyone thinks. So there's so many guys there now. There's none of them can be workhorses. It's going to be impossible. TTV real quick. Alvin Kamara going to bounce back this year. I think if he's healthy, he's going to bounce back. He's on a great offense, and I have a lot of confidence in Drew Brees, and Emmanuel Sanders being added to the equation only helps the offense. I know he was kind of here and there last season, and then he really started hitting it towards the end of the season when he actually got healthy again. So like I said, I think if he's healthy, he will hit. Really quick, Brandon, before we get back to the Leonard Fournette talk, do you agree on Kamara bouncing back if he's healthy? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he's a great back, and he's on a great offense. So I think that's pretty clear cut. Billy, Fournette on the Bucs. What are your thoughts? What happens to Rojo?
I don't care about Rojo, man. My Keyshawn Vaughn shares get the throwing it right into the dirt right there, man. That's a smack in the face for your boy over here. But honestly, I really do like this signing for the Buccaneers. This is the type of play that is going to make me bet outright on the Bucs winning that division over the Saints this year, because they just found their running back.
So as far as Fournette, Brandon.
Hey, Brandon, don't shake your head. It's betting, man. If you can bet $100 and they gave you $500 for the Bucs winning the division, why not throw it?
I'm not worried about the bet. Just the fact that you said they finally got a running back. Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's how they believe, man. They feel like they got good value for it. I mean, they're obviously not confident in the people that they had already, so they had to sign somebody.
See, okay, it might be that. I'll give you that. But here's the other thing, too. We only got Brady for 2 years. Arians is going to retire when Brady retires. Okay, I doubt he's going to put in his 4th year if Brady doesn't stay for a 3rd year. And he's probably just trying to put all his eggs in the basket if we have the cap space. I understand it from the Bucs organization perspective. I'm not going to say that it was like a bad signing. I'm definitely not going to say that. It's just, to me, it's like, look at the Bucs roster right now, man. Like, what is going on? Like, if I told you that, like last year, if I told you about Brady, Gronk, Fournette, LaShawn McCoy, somebody been like, what is this Madden team? Like, this isn't reality. It's just like, it's insane.
It's crazy. It's all right. You pivoted tonight because you told me the other night that you were going to go with Rojo as my guy, and you did switch tonight. So
I did
because, and you said earlier on the pod,
crystal ball.
In case Fournette does sign with the Buccaneers, which it's just so funny that it happened on the pod.
Ridiculous.
All right. As far as my opinion on Leonard Fournette, we can't forget. My argument was never that he was a bad player. Like my whole I'm off Leonard Fournette to this point has never been me saying he's a bad player. It's been that Jacksonville is a bad team and that Chris Thompson's going to get the passing work. But let's not forget that Leonard Fournette is a former 4th overall pick, and he was a can't-miss prospect at the time because he was really dominant in college and dominant in high school. The only problem with Fournette was some kind of character concerns, some off-the-field issues. But then you look at Jacksonville, they had one great season, but besides that, they've been terrible. And as the Leonard Fournette type of runner, it's kind of hard to succeed on a terrible team. We've seen it before where players just get dealt bad hands. So maybe it's possible that, to this point, Leonard Fournette has just been dealt a bad hand. And now, I think Tampa Bay is an incredible upgrade from Jacksonville. So to me, I just think it's definitely an upgrade from Jacksonville to me.
I have a quick question
to the point where
yes, sir.
This is so off the
radar.
Yeah. So you're like, you guys are probably gonna be like, what? But I'm just curious if you guys know logistics. So if they just signed Fournette, right? They obviously have McCoy, Rojo, whatnot. They had the cap space to do it. What are the chances? Just hear me out. What are the chances that they signed him, paid him his money, so that they could trade him to a team that doesn't have the cap space for him and get a pick back?
Ooh, that's a greasy theory right there.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff I do in Madden, bro. That's the kind of stuff I do in Madden all the time.
It is deep fried. That is a deep fried theory. I'm not sure about that. I mean, look, I will just say that I rarely see that happen in real life. I mean, we saw it the other year when New York signed Teddy Bridgewater and then traded him before the season started to New Orleans, who had him as a backup. Yeah. So
and we saw it
happened before.
Brock too, didn't we? Or something similar. Brock Osweiler 2 years ago.
Oh, I thought you meant Obama. Brock Osweiler. I'm sure that happened because Brock Osweiler got traded like 5 times. Get Trey's comment off the screen. I don't want to see it.
I'm sorry. I had to put the boss man up there.
No. Stop.
Let's
My
get
victory
into
lap.
my guys, though.
Wait. My victory lap still stands. Leonard Fournette got cut, so I won the argument. I don't care. We're not bringing it back now that he's on the Bucks. I don't care.
Yeah, I'll give you that win. I'll give you that win. That doesn't count. That's not a fair assessment.
All right. Billy, I believe we'll head in your my guy, your quarterback, my guy here, who is Leonard Fournette's former quarterback now.
I love Gardner Minshew for the upcoming season. He's a great dynasty and a redraft buy for me. Minshew basically beat Foles for the job last year after Foles got hurt. Last year, from weeks 1 through 9, Minshew was a QB 12. From weeks 13 through 17, he was a QB 14. He led the league in passing rating on throws 20-plus yards downfield. And the Jags threw the 10th most passing plays per games last year, often in negative game scripts, and I expect the same in 2020. Garbage time central. Minshew has sneaky rushing floor. He rushed for 344 yards over 14 games, which finished as the QB 5 last year. Him and Mahomes are the only rookie QBs to throw for 3,000 passing yards, 20-plus touchdowns, and under 10 interceptions. You could take that stat and project it however you want, but it just shows the upside that Gardner Minshew has for the upcoming season and for years to come. My only fear for Dynasty about Minshew would be if the Jags did so bad and drafted a quarterback, maybe number 1 overall or something like that. But all things considering, for right now, how the situation holds, I feel like Minshew's going to have a good upcoming season. Him and DJ Chark are 2 Jaguars that I'm very inclined to buying right now. How do you guys feel about Gardner Minshew for the upcoming season as a late-round quarterback?
I'll touch on Gardner a little bit. As far as this season, I do like him a lot. I believe I'm currently have him ranked at 18, which is probably a little Stop with the Trey comments. I can't take it anymore. My victory lap went around the world, Trey. I started resting, and that's when it kind of came and smacked me in the back of the head. So anyway, back to the Gardner Minshew argument. I think he's going to get a ton of passing volume, because the defense is absolutely atrocious. I think he's going to have a strong rushing floor. My only question would be the targets that he has available to him. We all know DJ Chark is great, but what after him? Chris Conley? I mean, he's okay. Laviska Shenault,
You took the words out of my mouth, man. He's not just a rookie. He will shock some people, man. He's one of those rookie profiles that kind of just go under the radar on player profile. But if you really do the deep dive into the film work and all that, Laviska Shenault, I'm probably pronouncing that so wrong, but yeah, I do like his upside. Real life wise, not fantasy wise for the upcoming season, but real life wise, I feel like that can really help out this team.
I can agree with that. Brandon, your thoughts on Gardner?
Yeah, I love that you picked Minshew, because I was struggling whether to go with Burrow or Minshew. I actually have Minshew as my quarterback 10. So I completely agree with you with Minshew. Like in redraft, I've got Burrow and Minshew basically everywhere. So yeah, I love it because, like you guys have already touched on, the huge pass attempts with how bad the defense has gotten, his rushing floor, plus he had he did have 0 rushing touchdowns last year. He's bound to get at least a couple with how much he runs the ball. And he's a man with a mission. I mean, if you're Gardner Minshew, like a lot of times, like it's great to look at stats and stuff, but a lot of times I like to try and find like a different angle to look at something. And one like angle that I think you can take is for a guy like Minshew. He sees all the news everywhere. He knows everyone's like Trevor Lawrence to the Jaguars. Every single mock draft, the Jaguars are going to be the worst team in the league. They're going to replace Minshew. You think that guy's not going to come out this year a man on a mission? He's going to put that team on his back. Whether it works or not, for him making that team good, it's going to work out for fantasy. And if you've seen him recently, you see his like videos. He looks like a stud. He looks ready to take a pounding in the running game too. Yeah, he looks like he's ready to go. And one other thing too is I think it can raise his ceiling. The fact that he's worried about, possibly not being in Jacksonville and not being their future quarterback. Because why does it raise his ceiling? I think he's going to take more risks. Because if anything, the one thing you need to show to get possibly a backup job somewhere else is upside that somebody can just drool over, because he's a young guy. So if he takes like Fitzpatrick-esque risks more often, that's going to be great for fantasy.
Yeah,
I definitely do agree with that. Rob, you are back up on the clock. He was the cover boy for this episode. Me and Rob, this is a really weird episode for me and Rob because me and Rob really don't see fantasy the same. We have very polarizing opposite sides of viewpoints. But when me and Rob are both on the same guy, man, it is scary, man, because that means that guy must be pretty good. But Rob, talk about Brandon Cooks more, man. Let everybody know why it's a New Jersey, but it's still the same Brandon Cooks.
Yeah. All right. I want to say 6 months ago, in March, back when I first, really came on with the Fantasy Forecast, try his website. I wrote an article on Brandon Cooks and why I thought he was a great dynasty buy and why I think he's going to have a bounce back season. And now I'm just doubling down and I still believe, even with the recent Will Fuller hype, I still believe Brandon Cooks is the best wide receiver one on that team. First of all, Will Fuller has never played without DeAndre Hopkins on the field opposite him. So, he's never seen the number one coverage. And, one of the biggest arguments whenever we had our arguments about Leonard Fournette was Chris Thompson. So I don't understand why people don't kind of just take into effect that same injury risk with Will Fuller, because people are so, happy and excited to claim him as the wide receiver one, as though Brandon Cooks has never been a wide receiver one. Yes, he had a terrible...
Notre Dame, Will Fuller. Just had to throw that in there. Plug out to my brother out there in Notre Dame.
You and these Notre Dame references, man. I just will have to avoid...
It's different when you see the person, like, you know what I'm saying, and you see them play, like, way too much of their college career. So I feel like it definitely skews my college football memories because I don't really like college football.
Oh, well, I disagree. But anywho, back to Brandon Cooks. Yes, last year was terrible. But when you talk about this season, Brandon Cooks, when you talk about before that, Brandon Cooks had 4 straight seasons of 16 games and over 1,000 yards. And if you think that's impressive, he did it on 3 different teams. And okay, he was traded 2 times within that range, so why don't teams want him? Well, first of all, the Saints traded him to the Patriots for a first-round pick. And they already had Michael Thomas. Like, if you're the Saints and you're not making that trade, then what are you doing? So, that's a no-brainer to them. And then the Patriots just didn't want to pay him because Bill Belichick and do you trust Bill Belichick with wide receivers that aren't named,
Randy Moss?
Well, Randy Moss.
That's what I'm saying. Wide receivers not named Randy Moss, Julian Edelman, and Wes Welker.
Yeah, 3 wide receivers over 20 years now in New England. So, moving on from Brandon, and they got a second back for him. So the investment from Los Angeles was great. I wish I had this article pulled up, but I took a look at the differences between last season. While I pull this up, Brandon, why don't you tell me what you think about Brandon Cooks, because I'm not sure where you side between him and Will Fuller.
Okay, that's fine. I like Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller. I think they're both really good at their value. They're both, after the 7th round, so I like both of them. I do, if you're guaranteeing me health, I would rather have Will Fuller, and that's just because I think he already has the established chemistry with Watson, and I think he's a little bit more a more complete receiver than people realize. But if you're just telling me to draft one and, in a regular situation where I'm not guaranteed health, then I'll probably take Brandon Cooks, because concussions are not the same as, constant injuries all the time.
Yeah,
I'm more confident that Cooks will play. Yeah, I'm more confident that Cooks will play, the whole season than Fuller by far. And then you also have the fact that Cooks has been great everywhere he's gone, even in the first year. Brandon Cooks actually, so this didn't this worked out for me the year that I did it, but then after that, it didn't work out. But I actually took Brandon Cooks in the second round of a Dynasty draft, I think 2 years ago, because he was so young, and I loved how no matter where he was at, he was great. He was always, like, at worst, wide receiver, like 15 or 16. He was always in that, like, 8 to 15 range, and I took him in the second, and it worked out for me that year. But obviously now his value has dipped, but he can get back to that easily. It's not like he's an old guy. He's got a good quarterback. As long as, everything clicks in terms of chemistry, I think he'll be really good, and he's definitely worth the price.
All right. So while you were talking, thank you for buying the time. I pulled this up. Cook's target count from 2018 to 2019, and this is the same exact team, exact situation. His target count dropped by 45 despite him missing only 2 games. And obviously, that's over. If it were just 2 games to say, oh, he missed those, that's why it accounted for it. You don't miss over 20 targets in 2 games. He finished with 42 receptions for 583 yards and touchdowns. His receptions per game dropped from a career average of 4.8 to 3.0 in 2019. So that's about 2 catches. Targets dropped from 7.3 per game to 5.1, so that's about 2 targets. His yards per target, which had been 9.4 in his career up to that point, fell to 8.1. To me, this is more along the lines of the Rams had a really bad offensive line, and Jared Goff is not the kind of quarterback that can buy time in the pocket. So Brandon Cooks, who's primarily a deep threat, primarily a guy who's going to work downfield, if he doesn't have time, if Jared Goff doesn't have time to throw the football, he's not going to be able to target Brandon Cooks downfield. And you see that with the decline in targets, over 2 less targets per game in 2019. But now you enter a situation in Houston where Deshaun Watson is a great guy when it comes to buying time in the pocket. Houston has had a terrible offensive line the entire time that Deshaun Watson has been in the league, but he finds a way to create time for his wide receiver. Will Fuller will benefit from that too, but I think Brandon Cooks is a guy who has been in this position before as the wide receiver 1. I think he will benefit the most here from getting the quarterback upgrade. Billy, like you said, you're on Brandon Cooks. How in are you? Like, put your money where your mouth is in fantasy draft.
I would say I have about 20 to 30% of shares, but honestly, the only reason why I have so much Brandon Cooks is because the ADP between him and Will Fuller, I don't really agree with. In some drafts, you see them either go back-to-back rounds, or you either see Will Fuller go a round ahead of Brandon Cooks. And I just feel like they're just a little bit more separate between the two. So if that's the case, then I'm going to take the buy for Brandon Cooks because I believe in him more. And the ADP is basically almost the same, which I think is very off.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Let's get into – I'm going to go to my last guy of the night, get us quickly in and out of here.
Can I say that this is very disgusting?
This is very disgusting, man. I'm going to get into it. It's a pick on draft day that's not going to be sexy. It's not going to be the pick that everyone's going to be like, oh, shit, man, you're going to the fantasy championship. But that's the type of pick that is going to be a fantasy PPR monster in 2020. The Jets did not make an immediate wide receiver impact addition over the offseason. And over the training camp, you see every day some type of Jets wide receiver is dealing with some type of nagging injuries. And I feel like Denzel Mims, I'm high on the player, but I don't think that cuts into Jameson's Crowder upside for the upcoming season. If anything, I feel like that helps him for the upcoming season. It's been so bad that Adam Gase has been talking about using Le'Veon Bell as a receiver. And if you follow the news stories, man, Adam Gase has nothing nice to say about Le'Veon Bell ever. In 2019, Jameson Crowder finished as a wide receiver 31% of the time, which was as much as Devontae Parker's breakout season. He had some blow-up games last year. I feel like this is the post-breakout year for Jameson Crowder. Remember when everybody was drafting him over at the Redskins, and they're expecting a great wide receiver season from him, and he disappointed everybody. If Sam Darnold plays all 16 games, we will be getting a top 25 season from Jamison Crowder, and you're getting him super, super late in drafts right now. How do you guys feel about Jamison Crowder?
Go ahead, Billy. Go ahead, Robert.
It's all good, man. I actually just drafted the other night and took Jamison Crowder because I was kind of in a pickle where I invested a little heavily into running backs and tight ends, and I had Robert Woods to that point, but I didn't have any other wide receivers. So, yes, I took Jamison Crowder because I see him as Jarvis Landry of years past, where Jarvis Landry in Miami was consistently a top 20 option at wide receiver because, yeah, is he going to average 6 yards per target? Probably, but is he going to get, 130 targets? Yeah, probably, especially when you look at the camp injuries for the New York Jets right now. I mean, Crowder himself is hurt, yes, but it's nothing serious. And then you have Denzel Mims hurt with a hamstring injury, Rashad Perriman hurt. I mean, Chris Hogan is running with the ones right now. That's how bad the Jets are at wide receiver. So now Mohamed Sanu, a piece of news that we didn't talk about, Mohamed Sanu is getting cut from the Patriots, and we know how much the Jets would like to spite the Patriots and take Mohamed Sanu and make him good there. But I don't think that would hurt Jamison Crowder's value. I think Jamison Crowder is going to play the role regardless of who's there, and the role is just going to be, peppering him with targets, even if they're not efficient.
I definitely do see what you're talking about there. Brandon, how do you feel about the Jamison Crowder predicament?
I like him a lot. It's perfect timing. This morning, I went back and restatted the New York Jets because of the fact that Rashad Perriman and both him and Denzel Mims have both been missing time. And obviously, they're both new to the team, so that's not going to be helpful at all. One's a rookie, and Perriman, he's basically a rookie because it's his first year there, even though he's been in the NFL. So the fact that they've been out already is going to push so many more targets Crowder's direction. He was already planning on getting a bunch. Now it's even more. Plus, the defensive losses of Jamal Adams and C.J. Mosley opting out, that's not going to help the Jets' case at all either. I actually think the Jets might be one of the worst teams in the league, which might be better for Jamison Crowder because they're going to have to throw the ball so much. So I like Crowder. I moved him up. So this is going to be as high as you like, but I would draft him higher than I have him ranked because I think he's, really consistent, really safe.
You don't even have to.
Huh?
You don't even have to with the ADP that he's at right now.
That's
but
true.
You can continue.
Yeah, I just moved him up to. He was at wide receiver 38 after I took some targets away from Mims and Perriman, spread it out to Herndon. Herndon was the guy I had to bump up a lot, but I also gave some to Crowder, and Crowder moved up to my wide receiver 31 right now. But he's like neck and neck with the guys all the way up to like 25. So I like taking him for sure, especially late.
Yeah, that's about the same range I have him at. I have him as the same tier as Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, AJ Green, Marvin Jones, and he's ranked at number 34. That wasn't in order, the names that I named off, but yeah, I definitely see what you're talking about. But Brandon, you're right back on the clock right now with your last guy of the night. You know what they say as hosts, you always got to treat your guests with the most respect. So we're going to let our guest close off the night with this one with Tyler Boyd, the slot wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, so I have there's this like running joke on Twitter that anytime somebody says something bad about Tyler Boyd, I get tagged somehow because like everyone knows I'm the Boyd man. Like,
I mean, you kind of asked for it with your bio.
I do, yes.
Smash running back early and then draft Tyler Boyd later. So, I mean, you're asking for it immediately.
I am, for sure. And I think I'm going to get a lot of credit when the season's over because I definitely think there's no way he doesn't outperform his ADP. But
I agree with that.
Yeah, this is super hot. I have him as my wide receiver 8. I know everyone's going to think I'm crazy. So just hear me out. Don't think I'm crazy until you hear the stats. All right. So Tyler Boyd has – okay, right now he's already being drafted outside of the top 30 or like right at 30 since becoming a starter, he's never finished worse than wide receiver 18. That's already a 12 spot like steal value, right? He saw an upgrade on the offensive line. Jonah Williams is coming back. An upgrade at quarterback. I don't care that Joe Burrow's a rookie. I don't care that it's COVID season. The fact is that Andy Dalton has been so bad the past 2 years. There's like almost no way that Joe Burrow is not going to be better than that. I mean, I have Joe Burrow at like a 61% completion rate. Like it's not even, and like we talked about earlier with Burrow, he's going to throw the ball so much. They're going to throw the ball a lot. So a lot of people, let's talk about targets. A lot of people are worried. AJ Green's back. That hurts Tyler Boyd. That's what you would think. But if you actually look at the stats, Tyler Boyd with AJ Green on the field, once Tyler Boyd became a starter, he averaged more fantasy points per game than AJ Green. AJ Green was at 17. Boyd was at 17.5. Boyd was the number 2 receiver in fantasy football for that 8-game stretch with AJ Green on the field. This is with Andy Dalton, which is going to be worse than Joe Burrow. They weren't passing the ball as much as they will this year because this is 2 years ago. And they also had a worse offensive line. So every single thing has gotten better around him. And we see from the stats, if you just look at them, and it also makes sense logically if you think about it, that when the offensive weapons on the outside receivers get better, it only helps Tyler Boyd because he works the middle of the field. He works the slot. He's the only slot guy there. Some people say, John Ross can go in the slot. He's not. Yeah, I'm not worried about Erickson at all. He's like the sixth receiver on their depth chart. So I'm not worried about him. Tyler Boyd is dominating that slot position, and adding AJ Green or him coming back and adding T. Higgins, that's only going to make him more efficient. And it doesn't even hurt his target percentage because if you look at his target percentage when he was with AJ, it only went down by 2%. That's it. And it's going to stay like stagnant at what he's been getting the past 2-3 years. And the last thing on Boyd is not only were his points per game sky high when AJ Green was on the field, he was also so much more efficient in every category. His catch rate was up 13%. I believe it was 13%. It might be like between 10 and 15. But 13 is the middle of that, so I'm going to go with 13. And then his yards per reception, more than 3 yards per reception better. His yards per target with a higher catch rate and a higher reception per reception count was way higher, like 20% increase. So I don't see any way Tyler Boyd doesn't smash at his ADP right now of the 7th round. Hopefully none of my league mates listen to this podcast. So here's the thing. On my podcast, I don't talk about where I will draft Boyd because then I always get sniped.
Yeah.
So I talk about how much I love him, but I don't tell people where I'll take him. But I would take Tyler Boyd in the 5th round. Like if I was worried about somebody else in the room liking Boyd, I would take him in the 5th round. He's my wide receiver 8. And look, that might be too hot. Maybe he's like wide receiver 15. Still, wide receiver 15 at the 5th round is a value. Wide receiver 20 in the 5th round is a value. And he's always finished better than that. So I don't see how Tyler Boyd is not a slam dunk.
I'm glad you're so passionate about this because Rob spoke a lot about you. And he said you're going to have some hot takes because I'm not a big Tyler Boyd fan. But you definitely have sold me on why Tyler Boyd is being undervalued for the upcoming season. There's nothing negative I can really say about what you gave us, man. Yeah, I felt like I just got, back to school with a history lesson right there. Rob, you got anything else to touch on that before we get on out of here tonight?
Yeah, I mean, like about Tyler Boyd, everyone's gonna say, oh well, he was so heavily targeted last season. But, he was just, and that's why they kind of look at it because, okay, AJ Green's coming back, so the targets are obviously going to go down. And, I'm just theorizing as, public opinion. But that and, rookie quarterback and things of that nature. But what they don't realize is that Tyler Boyd benefits from AJ Green being on the field because, and it makes sense, like, Tyler Boyd last season as the only wide receiver on the field. Yes, Auden Tate was there and Alex Erickson and John Ross was there for a few weeks and he was doing well. But for the only one that's really established to this point was Tyler Boyd. So, he's seeing the best coverage from the defense. But now when you have AJ Green on the opposite side who has established himself before as a top 5 wide receiver in football and can be that again if he's healthy, then that takes a lot of the pressure off Tyler Boyd, which helps his efficiency, as you highlighted. So, number 8 is probably a little too hot takey for me, but I definitely think he will be top 20 at the very least. And yeah, the value that you're getting on Tyler Boyd, I will probably take you up on that, and I'll invest because I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, as they say.
Yes, sir. Let me ask you guys a quick question. So let's say the season's over. Tyler Boyd finishes wide receiver 15. Are you leaning as props, or is that that's too far from 8?
Turns into a 3rd round pick after that, I feel like. But continue.
Yeah, I agree. What would you say though? Like if he was 15, I had him at 8, and I was like leading the Boyd train. Do you think that would be a win for me? I'm just curious.
I think anywhere within the top 20 is a win for you because their wide receiver position is unlike any other position this year. There's so many guys from that 15 to 40 range that you can honestly, 40 is a little bit of a reach, but 15 to 40 range, honestly, that you can just interchange position by position. So if he can finish as a top 20 wide receiver, I definitely feel like that's a win for you. How about you, Rob?
Yeah, I guarantee you there will be people in your comments saying, "Oh, but you projected 8 and he wasn't even top 10 or something like that." There will definitely be people like that. But
I already got my response ready for it. I already got it. It's look
in the draft.
Did my projection get you to draft him? Yes, that's 1. 2, did he do better than where you drafted him? Yes. So I helped you out. Leave me alone. Yeah. That's gonna be my response.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, like, there will be people trying to hate on it in some way, but if he is top 15, he's definitely helping you out for where you're drafting him. So
you guys want to hear my projection?
Sure, yeah, why not? Before we get on out of here about Tyler Boyd.
All right, so I have Burrow throwing 585 passes, and Tyler Boyd's projection for me is 140. I'll just round it. 140 targets, 100 receptions. It's 98. 1,250 yards, 7 touchdowns. There's room for improvement in the touchdowns, and the targets and reception. I get people are going to think that's high, but we'll see.
I can see a world where that happens because he was, like I say, he was one of the most targeted wide receivers in football last year. Yes, AJ Green wasn't there, but if Joe Burrow is coming close to 600 pass attempts, you have him as projected, which very well could happen with how bad Cincinnati's defense is and the improvements they still have to make. Then I could definitely see a world in which Tyler Boyd comes close to 100 receptions. Billy?
Yes. My thoughts? Honestly, man, I wasn't really too high on Tyler Boyd before this conversation, but I'm glad that both of your guys' great minds have really skewed my initial reaction about Tyler Boyd because I thought that Tyler Boyd was a little bit overrated because the whole entire Joe Burrow likes his target, stop wide receivers argument and all that. But honestly, man, the way that you projected that out and the way you talked about the other Bengal wide receivers, I definitely do feel like Tyler Boyd could definitely be the safest wide receiver, and he deserves to move up some rankings. I see a lot of people have him and AJ Green in the same exact range, and the way that you just described that right now, I feel like Tyler Boyd's taken over that AJ Green ADP draft position for 2021. So if you're listening to this podcast audio version wise, make sure you sneak out that little trade offer to the fantasy owner that owns Tyler Boyd and see how much do you really like Tyler Boyd. He sounds like a perfect flex. Yeah, he sounds like a perfect flex that can win you a Dynasty League this year.
Yeah. And again, Brandon at Deep Dive FF on Twitter, thank you so much for coming on the show. I loved having you, loved having those hot takes, loved having the argument because, we don't come here to be closed-minded. We come here to learn, and we come here to expand our fantasy football knowledge. And honestly, heading into this episode, I was thinking, all right, I know this man's going to say some shit about Tyler Boyd, and I know I'm not going to buy it, but let me at least hear it. And now now I feel like I've done a complete 180.
Yeah, honestly, a complete 180. When I saw that in the group chat earlier today, I was like, Tyler Boyd, man, that's a great flag play. I'm very interested to see what he's about to say about that. And man, did you absolutely nail that on the coffin tonight? I hope people
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Get the shares of Tyler Boyd and follow Brandon over at Deep Dive Fantasy FF on Twitter. And you need to look at his website, deepdivefantasyfootball.com.
Brandon, you want to shout out anything else before you go?
Honestly, I think you guys covered it. I appreciate you guys having me on. I guess the one thing I could say is the free draft sheets that you guys are talking about. Check it out. It's free. And also, if you guys, I don't know if you guys do projections, but if you guys ever get into that, you could always take my sheet, download it for yourself, and then change the numbers. And it'll I still have the equations in there for you. So you can always try that if you want.
Yeah, I have them done myself. I've kind of kept them private because I don't want people to kind of shit on me and for people, my league mates and everything. But you're a more generous man than I, so I will let you
crew back together again very soon for the early part of the season and help some people out.
Yeah, definitely. For us here at the Dynasty Force Podcast, subscribe on YouTube at Dynasty Force Podcast. Or follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Force Pod. We always go live on Twitter and YouTube. The videos are always live, or I'm sorry, not live, but available for your viewing pleasure on YouTube afterwards. Follow me on Twitter at Fantasy Force FB. Follow Billy at Getting Bills. And
clever.
I mean, yeah, it was very clever. I saw it when I first followed him like 5 years ago, and wow, getting bills. All right.
You know what's the craziest part about that, man? Quick little story for you to get out of here. I didn't even make up that Twitter name when I was in 7th grade and I was playing basketball. This is a long time ago. One of my friends is like, dude, you got to get on Twitter. And he made my Twitter name Getting Bills. And man, did that stick. And that's perfect for this. Yeah, I had Twitter for a very long time. I had Twitter since 2012, so about 8 years now.
Jeez.
Damn, that's crazy. Yeah. By the way, I've had my Twitter for 1 year now, and I have more followers than you, so you get burned.
Hey, man, it's all good. I'm not worried about followers because you ain't popping out as many tweets as I am. 41,300 tweets, man. Who else got that, man? Who else has that many tweets about some bullshit?
If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any listening platform, please give us a 5-star rating if you can. We would really greatly appreciating. Helps us move up the charts. And refer us to your friends. Refer us to anyone else. Brandon, again, so happy to have you on. Hopefully we can have you on again soon. To everyone listening, thank you all so much for joining and experiencing this beautiful My Guy episode with us.